How's it going, everyone? So you guys probably already noticed that it looks pretty different from my usual deck techs, and I'm trying some stuff out, throwing random stuff at the wall and seeing what works and what doesn't. And for this episode, I wanted to do some camera stuff, and this might be something that I do more in the future, but I need you guys to let me know in the comments whether or not you like this style, and go ahead and watch the whole video before you make the comment, or don't, whatever, it's YouTube. Everyone already comments before they finish the videos anyway, so screw it, let's get into the deck tech. So this week we're continuing on with Standard because Pro Tour Aether Revolt just finished and Mardu Vehicles just completely smashed the top 8 of the event. Personally, I think Mardu Vehicles was a meta call for the event. Everyone was expecting the green-black snake / green-black counters deck to win, or the Jeskai Saheeli. Like, everyone was complaining that the boogeyman of the format was going to be Saheeli combo. So a lot of people in response just brought in the best aggro deck of the format, namely Mardu Vehicles. So when I was deciding what deck I wanted to brew for this week, I was trying to think of like a good deck that would help fight the Mardu decks while also being able to take care of the green-black counters decks and the Saheeli combo decks at the same time. And I feel pretty confident in the deck that I've built today. So the deck that I present to you guys is black-white control. Now, before we actually get into the list, I have to let you know that this is a budget list and I wanted it to be under $100. Now, normally when I'm trying to like showcase a deck that helps fight other meta decks, it would make sense for it to not be budget, so that way I'm playing the best cards in the format. But for this, I decided that I wanted to just toy around with the budget idea, see if like your little kids that go to the F&M, or not little kids, people that can't afford like tier 1 decks can still like have a shot at beating those tier 1 decks. So you're not going to see any Gideons, you're not actually going to see any concealed courtyards or collective brutality, even though I really wanted to play with collective brutality in this deck. You won't be able to see them in there, but if this deck is really interesting to you, it would behoove you to play with better cards. If you have access to better cards in the format to sub other cards in this deck, please do so. We're first going to start off with the boring stuff. We're going to start off with our lands. We're playing 25 in the main board because we have a large array of spells that cost 3, 4, and 5 and 6 mana, so we need to be able to make sure that we can cast that stuff, hence why we're playing 25 lands in the main board. And we're first going to start off with a playset of Forsaken Sanctuary, just because it's the most boring land in the deck besides the basics, and it's just enters the battlefield tapped, tap, add black or white to the mana pool. Moving on from that boring land, we have 8 swamps and we have 8 plains in the deck. Now our colors, when I did the numbers of colors in our deck, it was a pretty even split. There's just a hint more of black mana symbols in our deck than there are white mana symbols in our deck, maybe by 2 or 3. So I just decided to cut the lands dead in the center, half and half. And for the rest of our non-basic lands, we have 1 Gaia Reach Sanitarium. Now, I'm a really big fan of this card. I also love Mikikoro, Center of the Sea, and while this card isn't exactly the same, having a Howling Mine in Standard, I mean, it's not Howling Mine, it's it's a looting card, it's a looting Howling Mine. I don't know what card that would be called, but regardless, having some sort of source from which you can draw cards from beyond your own cards in the deck, Live Fast, I'll go over that later. Having something like Gaia Reach Sanitarium, for me personally, is very underrated and heavily underutilized in the Standard meta game. So for our final land in the deck, we have a playset of Shambling Vet. Now, this card enters the battlefield tapped and can add black or white to the mana pool, but we can pay mana into it to turn it into a 2/3 with lifelinker and swing in. This can count as a win con in the deck if need be, but for the most part, this guy's just going to help us gain some incidental life and chump block some stuff, because there's a lot of creatures in this format, and we're going to be losing a lot of life pretty fast, because I will admit our deck is not the fastest. So it is very, very likely that a card or a deck like Mardu Vehicles can just go right under us before we have a chance to interact with them. It's just a fact of life, anyways, and having sources of life gain and the stuff in the cards like Shambling Vet, I think is very good. Moving on from the lands, we take a look at our win cons of the deck, and we start off with a 2 of Linvala the Preserver. So Linvala is a 6-drop 5/5 with flying, and if we can cast her and we're behind in terms of creatures or behind in life, she can get us back up there and help us stabilize. And not only that, but Having a decent body in the air, not just one but two, if we can get that online, is just really good for us in terms of like being able to catch up. We do have other instances of life gained throughout the deck, but if we can like get a Linvala online and get that life back, you know, we're just peaches and cream. Peaches and cream, does that make any sense? Anyways, we also get a 3/3 body off of this. I already said that, but it is another evasive threat to help finish our opponents in the late game after we've exhausted all their resources and killed all their creatures. We can just slam down a 5/5 and a 3/3 and just finish them out over the course of like 2 to 3 turns. And for our other finishers, we have Planeswalkers. We're going to start off with a 3 of Obnixilis Reignited. Now, Obnixilis here, I'm not gonna lie, he's not the best Planeswalker that we could be playing in this deck. The best Planeswalker is obviously Gideon, ally of Zendikar, but hey, you know what? It is card draw at the cost of 1 point of life. Oh, well, it's just 1 point of life. For one card draw, it's pretty good, and then we also get removal in his minus, and then his ultimate is, well, as an ultimate should be, it wins you the game. And for our last win con, we have a 3 of Sorin Grim Nemesis. Now, I think this card is super underrated in the format because it got overshadowed by other stuff, pre-ban like Emrakul, because what you want to be doing on turn 6 is totally relevant to like having Emrakul in the format. You know, is your 6-drop going to be able to do anything if your opponent slams down an Emrakul? And beforehand, Sorin was not going to be able to help you out at all. However, in this format, I feel like Sorin, not only having its +1 be a form of card advantage in the same that it's Obnixilis, but it can also kill your opponent because we do have a lot of, as I said, 4, 5, and 6 drops in this deck. So revealing the top card off of our library and like hitting a Linvala, for example, and shooting our opponent for 6, and then, I don't know, slam down Linvala, gain some life back, and get a 3/3, albeit that's going to be the best case scenario. That's going to be the ceiling. The floor is going to be like getting a 2-drop or whatever. Who cares? You know what? It's card advantage and it's life loss on top of a Planeswalker. Now, moving into his minus ability, it is removal again, but it's not removal to just creatures, but it's also to Planeswalkers as well, which I also find very valuable because I keep bringing up Gideon over and over again, but he's probably the most threatening, and I keep using that word as well too, but he's probably the most threatening Planeswalker in Standard, and it doesn't take much to actually kill him. All it takes is like 4 or 5 points worth of damage. Easy enough when you have stuff like Hardy Kieran, but even better when you have something like Sorin Grim Nemesis, and he starts off at 6, you just -4, hit a Gideon, and you still have 2 loyalty on your Planeswalker for them to swing in with the creature, or you can start drawing cards and so on. His ultimate is, like I said before, it's another game-winning ultimate. If we can get enough life, we can get like feasibly 10 to 15 tokens and then swing in. You know, obviously we'd be straight up dead to a board wipe, but in most situations, being able to get like at least 10 tokens off of his ability, in my opinion, should be able to win you the game. Starting off with our non-finisher spells, I wanted to take a look at some hand rip that you can be playing in the format, and I'm going to show that off a little bit in this deck tech. And we're going to start off first with a pair of Harsh Scrutiny. Harsh Scrutiny, for 1 mana, you get to take a creature out of their hand. Now, it's not as good as something like Despise from New Phyrexia, where you could take a creature or a Planeswalker, whereas in this you can only just take 1 creature. Like I said before, this is a very aggro / mid-range heavy format, and there is combo in there as well with like Jeskai Saheeli, so playing like a Harsh Scrutiny and grabbing a Felidar Guardian out of your opponent's hand, so that way you can save your removal spells for other Felidar Guardians coming up, is just really good. And it's obviously better beyond the combo decks, and it's much better against other creature focused decks like Mardu Vehicles or Green Black Snakes or Teamer Energy Aggro or Jund Energy Aggro. This pretty much rips everything out of their deck, creature wise obviously, but it will take most threats that can kill us, and if we can't take every creature out of their hand, you know, we're playing black-white control, we have a plethora of removal spells. And not only that, but the best part about the card is that you get to scry 1. Now, scrying, it is an evergreen mechanic, but we haven't really seen too much of that in Standard, so not Standard, but in Black. And we got that in the case of Harsh Scrutiny, and being able to scry 1, you know, sometimes we can keep risky hands, turn 1, play a Harsh Scrutiny, take a creature out of their hand and then try and go find a land or whatever that you need in their hand. I really think this card's underrated, and people need to play with it more in Standard. And I realize that I say that a lot. I am going to say that a lot because I personally think that every card ever in Standard is underrated and everyone should play with bad cards all the time. For our next card, we have a 3 of Transgress the Mind. Transgress the Mind is another hand rip spell, but for 2 mana, and we get to exile something with converted mana cost 3 or greater. Exile is really good in this format because there isn't that much interaction with getting rid of stuff from the graveyard. Now, granted, this doesn't take stuff out of the graveyard. It just makes it so that the card never enters the graveyard in the first place. And being able to take out like an Ishkana or some other cards that aren't seen playing Standard right now, like you could take out Gideons or Verdurous Gearhulks or any other types of like larger threats. This card helps take care of that, and it takes other things beyond creatures, so you can take like a Disallow or anything else that could be in your way. Moving on to our card advantage, we start off with a playset of Live Fast. So for 2 and black mana, we get a really bad impersonation of what's that card called? Read the Bones, where if I'm not mistaken correctly, it's scry 2, then draw 2, then lose 2 life, whereas this card is just draw 2 cards, get 2 energy, lose 2 life. Now, we won't be using the energy at all in our deck because there wasn't any energy using cards in the format that I wanted to use with Live Fast to waste spots, essentially. I just felt like being able to draw cards in black was something that we needed to do, and Live Fast, while it's not the best option in terms of like draw spells ever in black, this is pretty much as best as we can get in the format. And for our last card advantage card, we have a 2 of Hedron Archive. Now, I do have a little bit of a chubby for this card. I do love me some Mind Stones and some mana ramp. That's probably one of my most favorite things to do in Magic, is like get a bunch of mana going and then just slam down huge stuff. Probably one of my most favorite things ever. But beyond that, beyond being able to get to our 6 drops on like turn 4 or turn 5, this card does have that ability to draw more cards for us. And beyond this card and Live Fast, we don't really have much in terms of card selection in black or white, so we'll take what we can get. Moving on to our removal, we start off with our board wipe, and that is a 4 of Fumigate. This card, I feel like, needs to be used more in Standard. This not only helps shut down vehicle strategies because it takes out the creatures. Again, your opponent can just cast another creature the next turn and then crew that to smash in with the Hardy Kieran, and you're still dead regardless. But this does take care of like a wide board state in case you haven't been able to draw the removal spells in your deck. This is just a one like catch-all answer, and the fact that this gives you life for every creature that you've killed can help pretty much turn the tide of an entire game, because while 5 mana Wraths are mediocre and you cast them and you'll still probably die sometimes with something like Planar Outburst, with Fumigate, this can help you stabilize and come back from an attack, so that way next turn when your opponent tries to recrew their Heart of Kieran, you at least have some life back, so that way you're not just straight up dead to surprise crewing. And for our spot removal spells, I have a mix of like 2s and 3s and 1-ofs, because there's just so many good spot removal spells in the format that I don't think people are using. And no, before we actually get into it, I will say we're not playing Fatal Push in this deck because we don't really have that many cards to take advantage of the Revolt mechanic with, so it would just be a waste in the deck. 1 mana, remove something with CMC 2 or less. While that's like obviously not bad, I would rather use a removal spell that can like hit more, because we can't use that Revolt ability on the card. So starting off, we have a 2 of Battle at the Bridge. Now, we're not playing that many artifacts in deck. In fact, the only artifacts that we're playing are the Hedron Archive, so we won't be able to use the Improvise ability. But again, we can get more life out of this card because target creature gets -X, and then we gain X life back. That can help us stabilize, again, with all these super aggro and mid-range heavy decks in the format. We're going to be losing a lot of life in the early turns of the game, like turn 1 through 4. I would say we're probably going to lose anywhere between 10 to 15 points of life, and that, while that does sound scary, obviously we're not dead until we're dead, and cards like Battle at the Bridge can definitely help us in terms of stabilizing, so that way we can effectively time walk our opponent if we can like play this for 6. shoot something, gain 5 life, and be able to move on from there. And for our next one, we have one of Declaration in Stone. Now, I really like exiling in this format, again, because we don't have many ways of interacting with the graveyard. So having a card that can exile something out of the graveyard to not turn on Delirium for like Grim Flare or whatever is just fine with me. You know, being able to give the opponent a clue token, that I'm totally okay with that. I kind of find it better than a land or from Path to Exile, whereas in where they get a clue token, they actually have to pay into the clue token to be able to cash in on being able to recuperate from having their creature exiled. For our next card, we have a 2 of Immolating Glare, and while this card is kind of like a combat trick-esque card for like strictly just limited, this card did see play in Standard a few months back, and that's for a good reason, because this is a really solid way of dealing with creatures in white. Now, while white doesn't have the best answers or cards in terms of removal for like Standard or whatever format, I mean besides Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares, this card I feel like is pretty top notch. It's up there with cards like Stasis Snare or Declaration in Stone in terms of being able to deal with the creature. Now, on the bad side of it is though that the creature has to be attacking us for us to deal with it, but this is just a good answer to stuff like vehicles where in the format there isn't that many decent instant speed removal spells. You have stuff like Murder, Immolating Glare, Grasp of Darkness, Fatal Push. It is all in black and white. I think what I'm trying to say is play black or white, play black and white, just play black and white in Standard. The next reason why I say play black and white is because of Anguished Unmaking, and we're going to be playing 2 of them in the main board. Again, this is another card that exiles stuff, but not only can it hit creatures, but we can also hit planeswalkers, we can hit uncrewed vehicles, we can hit artifacts, enchantments, virtually everything that's not a land, obviously, as the card says. At the low cost of 3 life, though, if we're being honest, after you've already seen all the other instances of life gain in this deck, the whole losing 3 life, I'm not losing any sleep over it, really. And I really don't think you would be either if you were playing this deck, because yeah, you get to take care of a Gideon, but hey, you know what? Even if you lost that 3 life, you're going to be gaining that back next turn when you play a Fumigate, so who really cares? And of course, since we're playing black, we gotta play Grasp of Darkness. In fact, we're playing 3 of them, not the full play set, and that's because I'm a bad player and I don't like to fully utilize all the good cards in the format. We are just only playing 3 in the deck, and this is another good answer to stuff like Smuggler's Copter, Heart of Kieran. And while it can't kill Ether Sphere Harvester, it is able to kill pretty much almost every other relevant threat in the format, and it helps get around stuff like indestructibility because it's a --. So again, we don't have to deal with stuff like Avacyn Archangel or Archangel Avacyn or Selfless Spirit. And for the last spell of the deck, we have a 2 of Blessed Alliance. Now, this is kind of a pseudo form of removal because one of the options we get to make our opponent sacrifice a creature. We can untap up to 2 target creatures. Now, we don't have that many creatures in the board. We actually only have Linvala, so we can only untap our Linvalas. But like I said before, I like to play with bad cards, and even though that second mode on this card isn't that synergistic, you know, being able to gain life from its first mode, it fits our deck in terms of gaining life to help us stabilize from aggro decks in the format. And it's also an edict effect in white of all colors. I think white's had edict effects before, but like, anyways, I'm rambling on. Let's get into the sideboard. So taking a look at the sideboard, we take a look at cards that are already in the main board and we have extra copies in, and we bring these cards in against like various matchups. And starting off, we have Battle at the Bridge, Blessed Alliance. We also have another 1 of Declaration in Stone. The same can be said for Anguished Unmaking. Again, it's another source of exiling, and this does take care of planeswalkers. I really wanted to play with Ruinous Path, I really did, but the issue with this deck is it's way too slow to be relying on a bunch of sorcery spells like Battle at the Bridge. But with Ruinous Path and being able to destroy planeswalkers, while that is nice, I would rather have it be instant speed, and that's where a card like Anguished Unmaking comes in, so we're definitely playing that over Ruinous Path any day of the week. So moving on to the cards that aren't in the main board, we have a 2 of Authority of the Consuls. We pretty much only bring this in against a Saheeli combo. Now, while we do have a lot of ways to interact with the combo, being able to have a card that can just shut down the combo entirely, because let's be honest, Jeskai is not going to have the biggest selection in terms of getting rid of enchantments. Now, while there are cards that can do that, if we play an Authority of the Consuls and our opponent isn't able to deal with it, it's pretty much game over unless like they could play a Torrential Gearhulk or something like that. And for our next card, we have more exile clauses in the form of Quarantine Field. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of exiling, probably as much as a big fan as I am of life gain and making cringy videos like this. Oh god. And for our next card, we have an interesting one. It's Consulate Crackdown, and we're playing a pair of them. And I wanted to try this card out because I think it would be really good against like Metalwork Colossus decks, because as I've gone over the Metalwork Colossus style decks before in the past, they rely on getting non-creature artifacts on the board, and Consulate Crackdown can be essentially a board wipe to them and just blow them out before they can play a Colossus themselves. Or if they have a Colossus on the board already, hey, you know what? Consulate Crackdown takes care of it, and they won't be able to get the Colossus back from the graveyard because it exiles it. And for our next card, we have a 2 of Lost Legacy, and we pretty much bring this in against opponents where they have cards that we just cannot deal with, like even if they play them. I would say Emrakul, but Emrakul's already banned. But I'm bummed that this can't hit artifacts, and I don't understand why Wizards didn't make it so that you could hit artifacts, because I mean, they're probably bad at printing hate. They're not bad at printing hate, they just don't. Anyways, this card is just doing a semi-mediocre impression of stuff like Surgical Extraction or Extirpate or any other similar effects like that, where we can just go search for an answer before it even hits play and just exile it preemptively, so that way our opponent has to figure out how to play around us in a different way, while we can like play our removal spells and hopefully lock them out of the game. Not lock, but you understand what I mean. And for our last sideboard card, we have a 3 of Flaying Tendrils. Now, I would not play this card. Normally I wouldn't play with this card because we have access to stuff like, well, Fumigate and Yeheni's Expertise. But with this Pro Tour that just happened, Scrap Heap Scrounger is a really good card. The fact that it can just keep coming back, and it's just a recursive 3/2 threat that can just keep coming out of the graveyard, you know, that's a problem. And Flaying Tendrils takes care of that, because while it can take care of like the Veteran Motorist and all that other stuff in the deck, it exiles them instead of the creatures going into the graveyard. So it's just a way of dealing with Scrap Heap Scrounger and other types of creatures or like strategies that depend on the graveyard, obviously like Delirium, and being able to interact with cards like that with other strategies that aren't able to, like blue or red or green, because you know, you can destroy Scrap Heap Scrounger as many times as you want, but as long as your opponent has a way of getting him back, you know, eventually you're going to run out of removal spells, and that's where something like Flame Tendrils comes into play. And that's the deck tech for this week, everyone. Let me know if you enjoyed this format. I'm still trying new stuff. Who knows, maybe next week with next deck tech or whatever, it's gonna look completely different. Like, I'm in the early stages of this channel and trying to figure out what it is that I want to be doing, what my voice is going to be, and if this kind of style with like having the cards up here displayed or whatever, I just need your guys' input to let me know whether or not you like it. And I understand that I am rambling a bit because I do like writing scripts, but I feel like you guys appreciate it more when I talk to you and I explain to you the cards in like a more real sense. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but to me it does. Anyways, I'm Tasty Snackies. You all have been wonderful, and I'll catch you on the flip side.